Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we have had so much fun trying out all of the features like Q&As and polls that let us be really creative and engage with our audience. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome to episode 66 of Podcast Royal. I'm back from across the pond, and we have a lot of news to cover, 3 weeks worth, including Camilla's milestone birthday, Wimbledon, quite a few scandals actually, and a new Middleton baby. This and so much more. Let's get into it. It's great to be back with you after 3 weeks away. My, so much has happened in my life, your life, and the Royals as well. So how are you? It's great to chat with you. We chatted, as we always do, a little bit before we started recording, and I'd love to know how everything's going and what you're into this week.
Well, it is so great to finally sort of see you again. We're doing this over Zoom, but I'll catch up with you in person very soon when we do dinner. But it's good to see you after a long time. I know we've been away from the pod, and just so listeners know, we were not catching up on sleep. I think we've both been super crazy busy, and we're trying to get back into the swing of this podcasting thing. So forgive us if it is a wild and crazy episode today. And we've got so much news to cover. We don't even have a lifestyle segment.
I think we'll take up plenty of time with 3 weeks worth of news in the middle of the summer. So we'll be okay.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm doing really well, and I can't wait to hear an update on what you've been up to. I'll go ahead and get us started off with what I'm into this week. So I am into the latest streaming service that I've downloaded. And of course, in keeping with the theme of this podcast, it is BritBox. So I have been aware of BritBox for a while, but surprisingly, I have not subscribed to it until recently. And I've been catching up on some British television the past couple weeks. I don't know if our American listeners, if we have anybody who remembers growing up as a kid watching some of the classic British sitcoms, maybe on like PBS or something, but I used to love Keeping Up Appearances, Are You Being Served, Mr. Bean, all of the classics, and they're all on BritBox. And they've also got gardening shows, shows on real estate, the English countryside. So it's a good subscription if you're an Anglophile looking for some British television. I think it's like around $7 a month. And just so listeners know, this is not an ad. I'm just sharing what I've been up to. So, feel free to check it out and binge it if you haven't already, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably are already familiar with BritBox. So, all right, Rachel.
My mom has BritBox or had BritBox, and she really enjoyed it. So I think that's a solid recommendation.
Man, even if the only show on there was Keeping Up Appearances.
You and my mom are the exact same person. She loves that show so much.
I love me some Hyacinth Bouquet.
I don't know what that means, but my mom's listening. She always does, and I'm sure she's laughing or nodding or whatever the appropriate reaction is.
All right, so tell us what you've been up to and what you're into this week.
Well, I have a two-parter. So, of course, I went to Europe. This is not a spoiler. I had a fantastic trip to London, Paris, and Edinburgh. I have to say, though, for what I'm into this week, the other side of the coin, if you will, is slowly coming back to health is at the top of my list. Immediately after returning from Europe, I'm talking I landed that evening here in Birmingham at about 11:45. I got home a little after midnight and I took an at-home COVID test because I knew that I was experiencing something that didn't feel normal. And of course, tested positive for COVID-19, which really isn't that surprising because I was around more people during my 10 days in Europe than I have been around people in the last 2.5 years. We were on planes, we were on trains, we were on buses, we were, I just was constantly surrounded by people. And so I've never had COVID. So it's not incredibly surprising that I got it. I have to tell you, it's great to be sitting here with you today, feeling more like myself than I have in a couple of weeks. I'm thankful for my health, that my body is fighting this awful virus. I think I told you when we started recording or before we started recording, that's another thing. The brain fog is real. I've never, I mean, obviously I've had the flu many times, I've had a cold, but I've never had this new little element of brain fog. So I don't think I've made a lick of sense in the past like week or so. So listeners, forgive me. But before we started recording, you asked me how I was, and I think I'm at about 90%. Like physically, I think I'm okay. My ears are a little full right now. I have a little bit of a persistent cough, but it was a wild whirlwind, and I won't make the whole show about this, but the physical symptoms were roughly what I expected. The mental health symptoms were terrible. And I don't want to understate that. And I just wasn't ready for that. And but I'm doing better. It was truly the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Europe is incredible. I was there pre-heat wave. I was there when Boris Johnson resigned. That was strange. I was in Scotland actually, and it was a magical trip. And if I had to do it all again and still get COVID, I would do it. But man, COVID is not a joke, and it is not over. I know we're all saying it's over, where it's in the past, but it's very much still here, at least for me. So there's that. So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but it's good to be back, and it's great to be on the pod again.
Well, I am happy that you're back, and I'm happy that you are almost back to being fully recovered. I know we kind of chatted this past week a little bit, but it's hard from a friend perspective to support someone going through that, because when you
Yeah.
have to quarantine, it's like, you really just want somebody to hang out with, and you can't do it. So,
Yeah.
like we said, we'll definitely get up and do dinner here in the next several days. So
Please, absolutely. Well, there's been a lot of great fashion happening. I've kind of been in a weird place where I've tangentially been following, but I've either been in Europe or super down for the count sick. So I'm going to rely on you to deliver us your fashion pick of the week and the best look of the past 3 weeks.
well, I don't know if I'm going to disappoint listeners with this one, because we've taken a few weeks off. I thought I would highlight a royal who's really just been consistently rocking fashion all spring and summer this year. So I didn't pick one specific look, but this royal dresses incredibly well all the time. And listeners, if you haven't checked out Princess Madeline of Sweden lately, go look her up. So we've definitely talked about her
I
on
love
the show
her.
before. Absolutely, yes. Especially, we talked about her move from Sweden to Florida a few years ago with her family. But she's been busy at work this summer. She's been back in Sweden. She was recently in Germany for a work engagement. But if you go through and scan some recent photos of her, you're going to notice that this is like the summer of pink and lilac for her. And I'm really loving it. So I think she's someone to take major inspiration from. We have seen her in a mix of these pink and lilac hues. I've seen her in like a feminine sort of linen pantsuit. I've seen her in pretty floral maxi dresses, a little bit of lace, a little bit of ruffles. She's paired, pink with white pants and sunglasses, and it's just been like right on the nose with summer fashion, a mix of feminine and exactly what you would think a princess would be wearing when she's out at work. So that's my fashion pick of the week. I veered off a little bit from our British royals, and wanted to pick someone else who I just feel like who's been really consistent lately.
Well, we don't have a Royals Around the World segment this week, so that actually fits. And I think Madeline is absolutely stunningly beautiful. I mean, just stunningly beautiful. She's one of my favorites. So good pick. And before we get into the royal rundown, I'm sitting here thinking like I didn't even say anything fun that I did. I just talked about COVID the whole time. But I want to tell I'll keep it very royal centric. So obviously when I was in London, I did all of the royal things. I actually started to get sick in Kensington Palace. It was so, of all places, right? Like I've waited my whole life to go to Kensington Palace. And I'm in Kensington Palace looking at the Life Through a Royal Lens exhibit, which we've talked about on the pod many times, which is a great exhibit from what I can remember of it, because then I ended up in the bathroom, and I'll spare the details. But and then actually at Kensington Palace, so we went to Kensington Palace the week after Diana's, what would have been Diana's 65th, that's incorrect, 61st birthday. And the gates of Kensington Palace, which of course I've seen so many times in photos, especially when she passed away, with all the flowers and everything. And then William, Harry, and Charles walked through that area. The gates were covered with memorabilia and tributes and posters saying we love you, and it was so touching. Seeing Buckingham Palace in person was unbelievable. But I want to also share, in Paris, I actually am working on a story about the 25th anniversary of Diana's death, which is in August, and I actually got to go retrace the route that she took from the Ritz to ultimately the Alma Tunnel. They were going from the Ritz to Dodi's apartment on that final journey through Paris. And I got to, you want to know the creepiest thing, Jessica? Our Uber that took us to the Ritz to start this kind of, I guess, recreation was a black Mercedes, which is the car that not the exact year, I doubt, but the car that they were riding in. Very eerie. And while we were at the Ritz getting a drink and charging my phone before we started off on the recreation, we of all people, we ran into Anna Wintour, which was unbelible.
Yeah, I heard. I can't remember. Did you tell me that, or did I see?
I think I put it on Instagram.
Okay.
I think I put it on Instagram, but it was haute couture. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Fashion week in Paris. We missed Kim Kardashian by a day. She was there the next day, but we walked up to the Ritz because we were going to do this recreation, and there were crowds assembled, and we asked the crowds assembled, who are you waiting for? And they said, well, we heard either Emma Watson or a Kardashian is here. And I said, okay. And just as we were getting ready to walk in, out walks Anna Wintour. And that was just a mountaintop moment for me. But so anyway, we recreated the final ride. And, that's so morbid, and I realize that, but it is for a story. So when you see a place like the Alma Tunnel in photos, and you've seen it so many times, it always looks bigger than it really is. And this tunnel is so nondescript. It is a tiny tunnel. It's not tall. It's very claustrophobic. On the 13th pillar, which is the pillar that the car impacted, ultimately causing the accident, there is this beautiful photo I can't honestly tell you if it's a drawing or a photo. We were going so fast through it because I said, you can't slow down in this tunnel. Like there's nowhere to pull over or stop. There's no shoulder. And just this beautiful photo, this beautiful image of Diana. And I started to cry, of course. And then my Uber driver's like, oh my gosh, we've probably got a live one, a crazy one on our hands. But it was really powerful. And that is going to make for a really good story, I think. And then we went to Edinburgh after that. We had tons of royal things planned. My friend Stephanie went on ahead and did them, but by this time I was so sick that I barely got to take part in any of that. But I did want to share some of those highlights, especially the Paris highlight, because that was incredibly powerful to drive through that tunnel. And it's just so I can't, brain fog is creeping in right here. That's probably going to happen again. But if something that major in history had not happened in that tunnel would be the most unremarkable place in the world. But it is where something truly tragic happened. And to be there the summer of the 25th anniversary, plus this, I turned 36, which is the age Diana was when she died. I turned 36 in September. It was just really powerful. So I just wanted to sneak that in there because I don't want to make COVID the star of the show. So there's that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know our listeners enjoyed hearing about your experience as much as I did, and I also get to hear more when we
Yeah.
get together next time.
That's the Cliff Notes version. I was abroad for 10 days, so that was a very shortened version. But let's move into segment 2, the Royal Rundown. We have much to catch up on in the Royal Rundown. We've been away for 3 weeks. I pray we don't miss something, and I hope you'll give us grace if we accidentally do. If we forget something, we'll come back and revisit it in the next episode. But let's start with this. After accepting almost $3 million in cash from the former Prime Minister of Qatar, Prince Charles will no longer accept large cash donations for his charities, we've learned. Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim gave 3 separate donations totaling $3.1 million from 2011 to 2015. And Clarence House said recently of the donations that charitable donations received from Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, were passed immediately to one of the prince's charities who carried out the appropriate governance and have assured us that all the correct processes were followed. So it's not illegal to accept large cash donations in the UK, but there are quite a few procedures that must be followed if this does occur. And after recent scandals, which we talked about on the pod surrounding the Prince's Trust, and now this, it seems Charles and company want to just nip the whole matter in the bud and no longer accept large cash donations altogether, which I completely understand. So another scandal that seems to be tying itself up with a bow, although we don't really know much about it and what the conclusion was, is Meghan's bullying scandal, about which a palace probe is now complete and the findings of which will not be made public. Incredibly vague, yes, but a senior aide at the palace says that recommendations based off of the findings have been incorporated at the palace and that all staffers and members of the royal family, quote, will be aware of what the policies and procedures are, end quote. So there's that. Closed book, it seems. Didn't know if you had any thoughts on either of those situations.
Well, yeah. So the bullying story, like you said, it's there's a bow on it, but we don't really know what's inside the box.
Exactly.
I have heard that those who are not fans of the Sussexes are disappointed because they wanted claims made by palace employees to be validated through the findings in this report, being publicized. But I've also heard on the other side that those who do support the Sussexes throughout this whole mess are disappointed as well because they wanted some proof that, Meghan, in fact, was not bullying palace staff. So, I think it seems like whichever side you're on, everybody's kind of in agreement that they're disappointed that these results aren't being published. So I'm curious, do you think the palace, they made such a big deal about this? Do you think they should have published the results?
I do. Maybe I'm nosy and just want to know, but I would like to know what the answer is. I mean, as a reporter, I always want to know, well, what's the, and this is a taxpayer funded institution. And I know that maybe this seems a little bit salacious and gossipy and drama, but I think that, if it's a serious allegation like that, then I think that we as the public deserve to know, maybe not the gritty, grimy details, but at least something. And we got absolutely nothing out of this. So I think a little bit would have gone a long way here, but I also don't want to rehash. I mean, I to my personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion. I have really nothing to back this up, but I don't think that there was any there. If there was, I think we would have heard something from somebody. But I think it's just a closed book, and I wish I knew more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I would have liked to have seen something published as well after quite a big deal was made about it and it was publicized. And I don't know, I don't know what the findings were, but I feel like if they were significant enough for them to change some procedure, then um, shouldn't people know kind of how, how they're making changes to procedures, how they're doing things differently? Um, I don't know. I don't know. I have a feeling that they chose not to publish the results, given the relationship with the Sussexes and the palace is sort of shaky right now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's sort of related to maybe they came to some kind of like agreement on that with the Sussexes, but we'll never know.
We will never know. And it's interesting because we're going to talk about this in a minute. A lot of annual reports that, that were released as they always are at this time of year. And it's just interesting that, we now know like the 13 duties that the queen is executing, but we don't have any information. Like we know all of the deep dive on all of the financials of the sovereign grant, but we have nothing on this. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess we're just going to move on. But of course, as any reporter would, I want more information.
Well, while we were on our little break, the royal household released its annual financial statement that outlines to the public everything UK tax dollars have been used for regarding the royal family. So, most of this really doesn't come as a big surprise. We know it costs money to maintain the royal family, and they play a big role in public service and bringing awareness to important causes. And sometimes it takes money to publicize those things. But given the current economic situation, the latest royal report has some people raising eyebrows at how much was spent on recent royal travels, specifically the Cambridge's royal tour to the Caribbean. That was marked as the most expensive trip in the report. So I wanted to highlight a little bit about that. The royal tour to the Caribbean was an 8-day trip. I'm sure listeners remember our previous episodes where we talked about Catherine's wardrobe, some of the controversy around some of the Caribbean countries considering leaving the Commonwealth. But all in, the trip cost UK taxpayers $275,000. So that comes out to over $34,000 per day. Remember, this does include, travel expenses, security, other costs that we don't often think about when it comes to travel logistics for royals. But I also wanted to talk about some other trips that were mentioned in there, because I feel like, we've got to compare them on the same level. So if you're looking at the Cambridge trip, 275,000 sounds like a lot. Break it down, 34,000 a day. Well, the trip Prince Charles and Camilla took last fall to Barbados, that cost 168,000. However, that trip was barely, I think it was under 48 hours. So when you break down costs per day, it's actually 84,000 a day. So technically
Wow.
speaking, I think I would consider that to be the more expensive trip, if we're really looking at costs per day. Also wanted to mention Her Majesty the Queen took the royal train to Scotland to host G7 leaders last June, and that trip was just over 38,000. So I mentioned that to say I really don't think the Cambridge's trip was the most costly if we're looking at how much it costs per day. That was kind of my takeaway, but
They were
I
just there for so long that the number is huge.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was over a week-long trip and it was outside of the UK. So, of course, there's a lot of travel involved there. But I think the concern with the public is, they're spending a lot of money. Could they have been better stewards of their funds? Could they have cut back on the cost of their trips and allocate some of that funding towards something else? I know another concern that was raised was that the Royals spent more than 1.2 million on helicopter and charter flights. They also, so that adds up to more than 200 flights the past year. And people feel like that is hypocritical of them to push a climate control agenda, talk about, cutting carbon emissions, and then, asking the public to be conscious of this and their actions and really championing that cause, but then jet setting around the world or even flying into work engagements in the
Yeah.
UK. And I think that's a valid point for the public to raise. So I want to ask your thoughts on this. If you think they could or should be more thrifty when they travel, and do you think they're being hypocritical flying 200 times throughout the year while asking the public to cut back on their carbon emissions?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack here. So, I mean, when you look at the Caribbean trip in particular, let's just focus on that one for a second. What did anyone get out of that trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of that trip, what was the result? Was that, $275,000 to essentially lose three countries from the Commonwealth. It was not a successful tour. Anyone would say this. The Cambridges, if they were on this podcast right now, would agree with that. I think from the reporting I've done since March, since the tour happened, is that the quote unquote, the so-called Cambridge way is we're likely not going to see a tour like the Caribbean tour ever again. And I'm not just talking about, the racial overtones, undertones, whatever. I'm talking about we're not going to see a tour of that length and magnitude. Probably, maybe, I'm not going to say ever again, but it's not going to be the norm. Remember when Kate earlier this year went to Denmark? I think she was there for 2 or 3, max 3 days. I think she was there for 2 days. Mm-hmm. That's going to be more, and she went by herself. That's going to be more of the style of tour, I think, going forward, because you, at least, just again, harping and picking on the Caribbean tour, we cannot justify that amount of money spent on what was a disastrous tour, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do think that they should be more thrifty on royal travel. The royal train is basically rarely, if ever, used anymore because it is so expensive. One of the stops in Scotland that I missed because I was sick, and I'm so mad about this, is the Royal Yacht Britannia. That has been decommissioned to save money as well. So, I think royalty has a lot of glitz and glamour, and to a degree it should, but also I love saying this phrase, is the juice worth the squeeze? What are we getting out of all of this? If there is something, if we're getting something out of it, then I'm not a UK taxpayer, but if I were, I would be willing to pay the money. But for that particular tour, that's going to rub people really the wrong way because that was such a disaster. To your second question, I think to do the work that they do, they have to travel, right? They have to take flights. They can't take, boats across the Atlantic to do their work. And I mean, that's just that. I realize that cost cutting is important, but it's just really not feasible. I think that especially as environmentally conscious as all of, William, Charles, Harry, all of them are, I think that they need to find ways to make their travel make more sense environmentally. If that's a cause they're going to champion as they do, I think they need to find a way to make it work while still being able to do their job and do it efficiently. It's a real catch-22, but that tour in particular got a lot of headlines, that price tag, because it was such a disaster.
Yeah, I think you raised really good points, and I totally agree. I think you've got to look at, we expect, I think the public, to your point, especially if you support the royals, they're willing to pay tax dollars to do that. But I do agree there's got to be some outcome from those expensive engagements and trips that make that cost worth it. And I think that's, what's coming into question. And I do think they need to be more cautious about how they approach the climate change stuff. If they're going to champion that cause, again, everyone expects that they're going to have to take flights, they're going to have to travel. But could they explore some more creative ways to do that and maybe cut back on the number of flights that they're taking? So I don't know. I think you have to get behind the issue, that you're going to own. So, if you like taking 200 flights a year, maybe climate change isn't your issue. And and if you really want to push for, being mindful about that type of thing, then, you gotta walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. So
Yeah.
I think that's why that kind of came into question, is just, consistency behind your messaging there. So,
Look,
but I totally agree with your point.
yeah, well, you're a global royal. You need to travel the world, right? I mean, especially, with the Commonwealth, like I understand that, but so, there is going to be some cost to the work that you do. But as you said, we need to have an outcome that makes sense. Like nobody's going to get on to Kate for, I'm just going to pick on the Denmark trip. She went there, she did what she needed to do, and she came home. There was no extra bells or whistles. It was a work trip, and there it was. But just the opulence, and just I'm thinking right now of that like open top car moment in the Caribbean. It's just like there were a lot of things that didn't need to happen. And the good news is that the Cambridges in particular know this and they've learned from it. And I don't think that we'll be seeing a price tag like that again. I don't think we will. My prediction, I'll say it right here and now, is I don't think we're going to see a tour that's 8 days from the Cambridges possibly ever again. So
Wow.
I'll put that out there confidently. So, or at least maybe not ever again, but not for a really, really, really long time. So let's take a breather, shall we, from the heavy news and say what a delight it was to see Her Majesty make 4 days worth of appearances in Scotland for that country's Royal Week, the most we've seen of the Queen in a very long time, including at the Jubilee. So this comes as the Queen's role, as I mentioned earlier in the show, was formally rewritten by the palace for the first time in over 10 years. Her Majesty will remain head of state and head of nation. I know there was a lot of talk about around the Jubilee Regency and Charles. It's not happening, at least not right now, but due to ongoing physical mobility issues, her workload is being reduced. This is not a huge surprise, but it is now official and has come out as a part of the monarchy's annual reports. And any thoughts on that before we move on to Wimbledon?
Yeah, I think people just like to speculate and chatter about that kind of stuff, but no, happy to see that they've come out with some official response or headlines about that, so we kind of know where she stands in her role.
Yeah, I believe it has 13 bullet points of duties that she has. And I think we will continue to see her perform her role as head of state and head of nation, but we will also continue to see a whole lot more of Charles and William in her stead, especially at in-person events. And so while we've been away, one of our favorite royal sporting traditions happened. Wimbledon, of course. We saw William, we saw Kate, we saw George for the first time take in the tennis tradition. Some of my favorite moments, one of them, I loved seeing Kate. I love the relationship Kate has with her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton. She blew them a really sweet kiss when she spotted them in the crowd. I think that was her first day that she was there. Kate's fashion, as ever, we'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, seeing George. So I'm going to turn that over to you to talk about George's first Wimbledon appearance.
Yeah, well, we expected to see Will and Kate at Wimbledon this year, but we did not expect to see Prince George. So we were pleasantly surprised when the Cambridges did decide to bring him for the first time to the Wimbledon men's final. So he got to sit in the royal box between both of his parents, and we saw Kate in polka dots again, which, like you said, we'll talk about in a second. But they all looked like they really enjoyed the event. We know tennis is a family sport for all of the Cambridges. Both Will and Kate play, as well as all three of their children. But this was a special treat for George. He's the oldest. He has more experience with the sport. He had the opportunity to meet Novak Djokovic following his big win. And he even let George hold his really big gold trophy. I'm sure you saw the video clip of that, Rachel. I thought that was so cute.
Yeah.
You could tell both William and Catherine were a little bit worried. I think it was Prince William said, don't drop it. Which I thought was really cute. So. But we heard a lot of people commenting on Prince George being dressed in a full suit and tie for the event, given how hot it was. Some people thought maybe he should have been allowed to wear something a little bit more lightweight. So we'll talk about Prince George's fashion first. You were in the UK during this time, Rachel. Was it that hot?
It was not hot when I was there. This happened after, I think we'd already moved on to Scotland by this point.
Okay.
When we were in the UK, it was perfect weather. It felt like fall. It was such a nice respite from Alabama heat. But the heat wave happened not long after we left, and temperatures are really, really spiking. I mean, like over 100 degrees, which is not obviously not normal. I thought George looked handsome. I think that he was, playing the part, doing his bit as a member of the royal family. I mean, it was hot, but he made it, and he's a trooper. And I'm so excited to always see the Cambridge kids. I mean, it thrills me to no end to see them at more and more events.
Yeah, definitely. George, I think, has great manners, and I agree. I thought he looked great in the suit and tie, and I think that's good for kids. It's there are times when we can let loose and wear comfortable clothes, but I think it's always important to teach kids at a young age how to dress appropriately for different events. And sometimes it's not always comfortable, but you can do it for a little while. So I don't fault Will and Kate for having him dress up. I thought he looked great, and I thought they all coordinated very well. They all looked great.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we mentioned Kate was in polka dots again. So she wore a navy dress on this particular day with white polka dots by Alessandra Rich, which the dress retails for just over $1,800. It had short sleeves and it had this peplum detail around the waist. And Rachel, I have said on this podcast more than once that polka dots are not my thing, but I'm going to say this time that I did actually like this one. I don't know if it was the cut of the dress I really liked or the darker color, but I thought it fit her really well. I thought it was really appropriate. And one thing that I noticed with this dress was it made me notice Kate more than the dress. And I think that that's really smart fashion when the clothes highlight the person wearing it rather than them being so loud. It's like, I guess the better way to say it is Kate wore the dress, it didn't wear her. So
yeah, I agree with that.
I'm going to admit I'm not a big fan of the white Mary Jane pumps with the black toe that she's worn those a couple times, and I'll be curious to get your thoughts on that. I could have done without those. Maybe just a simple white pump would have worked really well. I think they were also Alessandra Rich. I think a lot of people did like them. They just weren't really my style. So what did you think of her outfit?
Okay, first of all, I want to mention this because I'm going to forget it because of brain fog. George is about to have a birthday in like 2 days from when this episode airs. On the 22nd, he'll be 9. So I just want to point that out. 9 years old. That's crazy. I remember when he was born and waiting to hear his name. Okay, so back to the polka dots. Okay, this is getting out of control. I like a little bit of polka dots I can handle, but I hate polka dots. I hate them on me. They look great on Kate. I just don't like them personally, but we are in polka dot overkill. Why are we doing this? Like, why so much? Like, why so much Alessandra Rich? A little bit is fine. Like, give me a taste and I'm okay with it. But why are we obsessed with this? Like, my favorite Wimbledon look from Kate was the yellow look. I thought she looked stunning in that. I mean, I'm just like on massive, like, again, a little bit of polka dots. Okay, it's not my personal style, but then again, not everything is. And she looks great. She looks great, but we're just doing this. Like I'm thinking of 4 or 5 polka dot looks in like the last month or so that we've seen. And it is just not my aesthetic and not my vibe. And I mean, Alessandra Rich, love you. I'm sure you're a great person. You're a fabulous designer, but I miss Amelia Wickstead. Amelia Wickstead is so much more my aesthetic and my personal style than Alessandra Rich. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, I will agree with you with the overkill and the polka dots. And it kind of makes me wonder how much say Kate has in her wardrobe. Do you think that she's like kind of more laid back and letting her clothes be selected for her? Or do you think she's like, no, I'm really into polka dots right now, guys?
I'm just not sure what this recent polka dot 1980s like silhouettes vibe. Why? Like, I don't understand.
I feel like I've been seeing a lot of stuff online lately where people are saying that they're burnt out by the coat dresses, and maybe she's trying to mix it up and bring in polka dots. But I love a coat dress, and I have said that before.
Yeah.
If I could find a beautiful princess coat dress in, my price point, I would totally rock that. I think they are classic. I think they're beautiful. I am all about a good coat dress.
And if it's 9,000 degrees like it is in London right now, don't wear a coat dress. Wear an
Right.
Amelia Wickstead, wear a Ginny Packham, wear just please I don't want to revisit the 1980s. I lived through the 1980s once and I have really bad photos of myself to show for it. And I don't want to do this again. Like, I don't want to do peplum again. I don't want to do polka dots again. Like, maybe this is just me and I'm just an outlier here, but and Kate, you can wear whatever the heck you want. You look beautiful, but like it is just not my vibe. Give me Amelia Wickstead, give me Jenny Packham.
I agree. I agree.
We,
A
we've
little bit of
taken a
polka dot
trend.
goes a long way.
Well, I hate this phrase, but we are beating this horse to death. I mean, we have like even if I liked polka dots, I would be over it by this point, right? Like we're killing this trend. Like we're just like it's too much. I don't like polka dots. There, I said it. I don't like 80s aesthetics. There, I said that too.
Listeners, if you have not picked up on this yet, me and Rachel don't like polka
I
dots.
mean, can't say it any more clear than that. Not for me. So please let anything else, stripes, anything. I don't like stripes either. I will take them. I will take patterns. I don't care. Just anything. Let's move on.
Well, let's move on to another outfit that I really liked, and we'll get to it as I talk about the next story. But it's been a busy summer for the royals so far. We've had all these different engagements going on the calendar, and Sunday was another big day. So it was a milestone birthday for the Duchess of Cornwall. And, I always wonder what sort of gift ideas royals give family members when they ask what they want for their birthday. If you are a royal, I've come to the conclusion that if you've got diamond tiaras and designer labels at your disposal, you probably want experiences as gifts to mark special occasions, more so than maybe like a physical gift. But if my theory is correct, Camilla's birthday falls right in line with this. So for her birthday, she was given the opportunity to guest edit Country Life magazine. It was a very special issue. It honors both her birthday and the magazine's 125th anniversary. She is actually not the first royal to guest edit Country Life. So Prince Charles guest edited the magazine for his 65th birthday, and Princess Anne guest edited for her 70th birthday. But there was something really special about Camilla's issue, and that was she specifically requested that the Duchess of Cambridge photograph her for her issue. And Rachel, I have to say, I think the photographs really turned out quite lovely. We got a few behind the scene images of Catherine photographing Camilla. I thought it was fun to see them work together in that capacity. And I just thought the photos turned out great. Camilla looked lovely. We'll talk about her outfit. So she had a light blue floral dress with a matching cardigan in a light blue color. She was holding in one of the pictures a basket of fresh cut flowers, and she had her beautiful English garden in the background, plush green floral. So great job to both, her and her work guest editing, and then of course, Catherine and her photography. And happy 75th birthday to Camilla.
Yeah. We don't often think, or at least I don't, about Camilla and Kate's relationship, but it was pretty touching to read that when Camilla was talking, who do you want to photograph you? She said, I think her exact words were, I'd quite like to have Catherine. And then the folks at Country Life were like, well, who, like racking their brain to think of a famous photographer named Catherine. And they're like, oh, the Duchess of Cambridge. And I found that to be incredibly sweet. And the photos are beautiful. Camilla looks, I will say, between the Country Life spread and the British Vogue spread, which I don't think we talked about on the show, she did a full spread, full interview for British Vogue that was interesting. Listeners, check that out. Camilla looks fantastic. And happy birthday to the Duchess of Cornwall. 75 is a milestone year. And I actually, the more I learn about Camilla, the more I like her. I have to say, I mean, these two interviews, she was very human and very relatable. And anybody that loves dogs as much as she does has to be at least somewhat of a good person. So I wish her nothing but the happiest of birthdays.
Yeah, definitely. She certainly looks to be super happy and she's just having a moment right now. And she looks really great. I totally agree. And speaking of her love of dogs, listeners should know by now if there is puppy talk to be had, we are discussing it over here on the pod. So I personally was very excited to see sweet little Orla, the Cambridge's Cocker Spaniel, accompanying them to a charity polo match recently. We've mentioned this before, but Catherine's brother, James Middleton, is quite the dog lover, and he actually has several Cocker Spaniels. Orla was a gift from him to the Cambridges, as was their late dog Lupo, who was also a Cocker Spaniel. But little Orla was very well behaved at their royal outing. She was walking alongside William and Catherine off leash. I saw her sitting for some attention. I saw Kate giving her a little pet. And so I think we've also talked about this as well, but Orla means Celtic princess. So I am sure this dog gets the royal treatment, much like Her Majesty's corgis. And as I was reading this story and I was, looking at the photos of the dogs, I thought, I wonder if the royal dogs ever get to play together. Like,
I'm
does
sure.
Orla, does she visit the corgis at the palace or the Jack Russell Terriers at Clarence House? I know my sister has a dog and I have a dog, and we get a lot of entertainment out of watching our dogs play together. So I have to wonder if the family brings their dogs around to picnics and other
Well,
events.
now that we know that Camilla and Kate have a special relationship, or at least they did for one day for Country Life. I hope that Camilla's dogs and Orla get to play together. And I want to say two things about this polo match. Number one, love a little bit of PDA between William and Kate at this polo match. That was cute. Second of all, I just looked this up and I was like, I remember this polo match and I love Kate's outfit at this polo match. I love this dress she's wearing. And guess who it's by? It's by Amelia Wickstead. So thank God Amelia Wickstead is still in the conversation. I mean, obviously, like Amelia Wickstead is just my vibe. And so I thought Kate looked gorgeous at this particular polo match. But speaking of sisters, you and your sister are super close. So are the Middleton sisters, Kate and Pippa. I want to sneak this in here. Congratulations to a very famous sister, Pippa Middleton Matthews, on the birth of her third child, a baby girl. Still don't know her name yet. So listeners, if you've heard that, let us know, because I haven't heard it yet. We announced in an earlier episode that we learned Pippa was pregnant again after the platinum party at the palace, which was, I believe, June 4th. The baby arrived right around a month later. So congratulations to the Matthews family. And in other news, Harry was in the news while we were away. He won the first stage of his libel lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday's publisher. Harry sued Associated Newspapers. We talked about this on the pod forever ago. He sued Associated Newspapers for libel back in February over an article that claimed he tried to keep details of his legal fight to reinstate his police protection in the UK a secret. And while this news does mark a win for the Duke of Sussex, there is much more legal wrangling to go in this case. And speaking of Harry, I'm going to toss this to you.
Yeah, well, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle arrived in New York City on Monday for Nelson Mandela Day, and Harry gave a speech at the UN General Assembly. In his speech, he talked about a photo that he has of his mother, Princess Diana, meeting Nelson Mandela in 1997. He mentioned visiting the continent of Africa for the first time at 13 years old, and how that's a place where he's found peace and healing time and time again. In his speech, he also challenged listeners to celebrate Nelson Mandela Day not just once a year, but every day by committing acts of service that help make the world a better place. He was in a black suit and black tie. Meghan was matching him in all black. She had on a pencil skirt, black pumps, and a black leather satchel bag. And I had actually mentioned to you, Rachel, that I wasn't really sure what led him to being at this event. But I saw an update this afternoon, and of course, I don't really have a whole lot on this, so maybe we'll hear more in the coming weeks, or months. But the Daily Mail did report today, this afternoon, that a spokeswoman for the Nelson Mandela Foundation said that Harry was chosen as a speaker for the event because the foundation is already working with Archewell on a Mandela-related project. Like I said, we don't have details on that yet. So maybe we'll hear more about that as that project unfolds. But what did you think about his speech to the UN? And what sort of project do you think they might have in the works with Archewell?
I have no idea. I mean, it could be, it could be something for Netflix. I don't know who knows about Netflix and Spotify with the Sussexes right now, but it could be some nonprofit work that they're doing. I mean, that's actually a really exciting partnership, and I'm interested to see what comes of that. But I thought Harry's speech was fantastic. I really enjoyed his anecdotes about his mom. I really enjoyed the sweet moment. I thought it was incredibly romantic when he was speaking of Africa and his love for that continent, and how he found his soulmate, Meghan. He didn't find her in Africa, but they went basically on their third date to Botswana for a 5-day trip to Botswana, and that's where he knew that she was his soulmate, he said in so many words. And I thought that it was, I enjoy seeing the Sussexes whenever I can, which is so rare. Meghan was wearing a Givenchy, who of course is her wedding dress designer. She wore an outfit that was that exact same outfit, except it was in green when she went to Ireland in 2014. Meghan had some serious fashion moments while in New York. In addition to Harry's speech at the UN, Meghan stepped out for lunch with Gloria Steinem. Then that night, Harry and Meghan had a glamorous night out in the Big Apple. I thought Meghan looked fantastic last night. The look, of course, reminded me, the black and white, of Kate's look to the Top Gun premiere. Both women looked fantastic. And I want more Sussex content always, is my refrain. So any thoughts from you on the Sussexes taking New York?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had heard that they were going, but it's always interesting to get photos from their events and the stuff that they're doing on their own now, separate from the royal family. So,
yeah,
still waiting for that podcast, but
it should be. I feel like it should be this month or next month. I mean, it's summer. It was what it said, so I'm hopeful. Come join us on the podcasting world. It's pretty fun out here. But let's close the royal rundown with the Queen, Her Majesty, as we should. She held her first investiture ceremony in 2 years since we've been away on our 3-week vacation / death's doorstep for me. The Queen bestowed the rarely given and very prestigious George Cross to honor COVID-19 workers with the National Health Service. We also saw her team up. I love when Princess Anne sneaks in for like a joint engagement. She did it with Kate earlier this year. In the past couple of weeks, she linked up with her mom to open a hospice, a surprise appearance opening a hospice not far from the Queen's home at Windsor Castle. So that made the highlight reel for me. So there's the news for the good of the order. We are not doing Royals Around the World this week. We are not doing a lifestyle segment this week. We're just keeping it newsy. There's certainly enough to talk about. I think we covered everything. I hope we didn't miss anything. We've got George's birthday coming up, and there's always something going on. But is there anything else that you would like to add for the good of the order this week to wrap us up? It's good to be back.
Yeah, I think we did. We covered a lot today. It is great to be back, and look forward to chatting with everyone again soon. And we'll have some more lifestyle content coming up. We'll also have some more interviews coming up. So, listeners, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Podcast Royal. Email us at hellopodcastroyal@gmail.com. And please follow, rate, and review our podcast 5 stars. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. Do it for the girl that's recovering from COVID. Do it for me.
And that wraps up episode 66 of Podcast Royal. Bye.
Bye.